Hello and welcome to SPOILERCAST, a Hungry Gamers offshoot that aims to inform, entertain, and educate you on one particular release from within the video game and or geek culture universe. And on this very special episode, we are tackling a game that is yet to be officially released and is yet to be scored on Metacritic. I'm going to assume it might be a nice high one, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Developed by Flying Wild Hog and published by those legends over at Devolver Digital, we're talking about the side-scrolling action game known as Trek to Yomi. And here is the setting for all you listeners out there. Trek to Yomi is an ultra-stylized cinematic action adventure that follows an enthralling story of Hiroki during his fall against the forces of evil. Experience his heroic return to make good on his failed promise to save the people he swore to protect. As a vow to his dying master, the young swordsman Hiroki is sworn to protect his town and the people he loves against all threats. Faced with tragedy and bound to duty, the lone samurai must voyage beyond life and death to confront himself and decide the path forward. And joining me on this swashbuckling journey, my friend, Australia's Jono Peck, who can be found at Jono himself. And obviously, I am Brendan White. You can find me on them socials at Brendan8bits. JP, how the bloody hell are you?
I'm great, man. It's fun to get on here and talk about a little indie gem such as this compared to our usual. We've had Horizon recently, Ghostwire. So this is be a bit more concise and short and sharp, just like the game was, a bit more concise. But swashbuckling is today, and I have to say, I think with pirates, when that term gets thrown out there, I'm not sure if it applies. But
Yeah, you're probably right. I couldn't think of like a nice adjective to tie into the samurai lifestyle. Like it's about loyalty and honor and things like that. But I thought, you know what, let's get the energy high, and maybe you played this game a little bit frantically in more of a pirate style vein instead of that traditional respectful swordsman style that the samurai are known as. But yeah, Trek to Yomi. Maybe we can jump in here for listeners just to give you a bit of an insight on how the spoiler cast works. So the first half of this podcast going to be completely spoiler free, so you don't have to worry if you haven't played the game yet and you're already listening to this. As we mentioned, the game is actually coming out this coming week on the 5th of May. There is no releases or reviews out in the wilderness at the moment, so you'll be listening to this the second that embargo lifts. But yeah, we're gonna sort of skirt around the finer details, not going to spoil any of the finer plot points, and just talk about our overall broad experience of the game. Then we'll give you guys a clear exit point if you haven't played and you don't want anything spoiled. Then we're going to go deep and nasty on everything spoilerific. So nothing is going to be safe in that latter half of the show. But JP, as is tradition here on SpoilerCast, what do you reckon? We'll jump in and sort of share our general thoughts and maybe talk about our overall broad experience with Trek to Yomi.
Yeah, definitely. Let's do that. I mean, I really liked playing this game. It's revealed, I don't know, what 6 months ago, or in fairly recent, definitely got a bit of a trailer at one of Devolver's conventions, was it?
It feels very fresh. Like it feels like, sometime in the last 12 months, we didn't really know this game existed, not long before that time period. So, it's fresh in our memory, and I think it's come out at the right time. We've got a little bit of a soft spot here in May, and I'm with you. I've been having a good time with Trek to Yomi.
I remember thinking when I saw it, like, okay, it's like a black and white 2D Ghost of Tsushima or Tsushima, and it turned out to be a lot more than that, I think. But at the same time, it did still deliver on that promise of delivering, like I said, the same kind of fast-paced action, the visuals that are very authentic feeling to the setting, the music and the sound. It's it really gives you a taste of that experience in a condensed experience. And it's not just like, as I found as I was playing it, it's more than just the 2D along the side scrolling thing, because there's the 3D exploration for different areas that aren't combat based. So yeah, it was a lot more than what I expected.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like from the outset with these trailers and the announcements, that it looked like a Ghost of Tsushima light, you could say, where it is. Yeah, we thought it was just going to be a traditional side scroller, in that feudal Japan era, but they really delivered above and beyond that. I think there was a pretty small team there at Flying Wild Hog that sort of put this together, and they were very respectful of that time period. And I think they really nailed the tone and the themes that were prevalent back then, especially as you mentioned, like we'll talk about in a little bit more detail later, is like the soundtrack or the score that accompanied this game. It felt very feudal Japan. It felt very much like we were living this samurai life. And that black and white color palette that is just all you see in this game. Like there isn't any smatterings of any other colors outside of, I think, maybe some in like the opening menu. I don't think there's anything in the game itself. It's all black and white and shades of gray. And it's so aesthetically pleasing. Like it is gorgeous and horrific in ways that we'll talk about a little bit later as well. But yeah, I really enjoyed my time with this game. Like it's played out over 6 chapters. I think that 6 chapters, it was a good sweet spot. I think my playthrough time might have been somewhere in the realm of 6 hours, give or take. I didn't see if there was a game clock attached to it. I played on the Xbox Series X and you played on the PlayStation 5. So we got same, but different experiences, you could say. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I felt like the game didn't overstay its welcome. Some of it potentially dragged a little too long in certain parts overall, but wasn't overly detrimental. I'm just like, oh, mate, we could get something else instead of this little loop here. Give me some more. But overall, I liked experiencing Hiroki's quest for honor and vengeance and what have you. And we'll talk more about that in spoilers. But yeah, I had a really good time. This game was a nice little hidden gem, I think. And there's going to be recommended potentially universally out there. It's good fun. The gameplay loop itself, it's a lot of killing. You kill a lot of people and beasties and everything else in between. But it was really nice to sort of work through this game over a couple of days or a couple of nights and just sort of have a little taste here and then go back and do something else and have a little taste there. So I just worked through this gradually over the week, and shout out to the guys at Power Up PR for chucking us a few codes early so we can jump into this ahead of schedule and get this released when that embargo lifts. But I really enjoyed it. The gameplay loop, as far as the combat intricacies, was really fun. There was some puzzles smattered in there too to sort of break up that just mindless slashing and samurai lifestyle, and it was good. I had a great time. What about you, JP, as far as that gameplay loop? You enjoyed what was on display there for those 6 chapters?
Yeah, I definitely, like I said, it was more than what I expected it to be, and I enjoyed how rewarding it was to explore those 3D elements, the 3D settings where there weren't any enemies, because there was always like maybe a little hidden room here or there with a collectible or some extra ammunition for one of the projectile weapons. So I thought that was cool, and everything just looked so good and felt so authentic to the time period and the setting. And because it is black and white, it almost requires your brain to adjust to a different kind of language as far as gameplay markers. It's very much like, what are they trying to point me towards? Where is the light shining in this scene? Oh, there's a light on that door, so that's pointing me towards the door. There's a light on this little alley at the back of the 3D space, so maybe if I head up there's a little nook that I can explore. So yeah, it was great to kind of rewire my brain to that kind of thing. And I guess like they use light in a similar way with when there's color, but you only have that to rely on because there's less perception without the color. Yeah. And there was a few times in the puzzles where like I was actually struggling to figure out where to go because I didn't have the same like depth perception without the color for whatever reason. I actually got off my couch at one point and walked up to the TV, and I was like, what am I doing wrong here? I was like, there's something that I saw as something different, but it was actually a staircase. I was like, oh, okay, I need to go back a little bit and then up the stairs.
And the game itself was super dark. Like even when you sort of first boot it up and you play around with your HDR settings as is tradition, and scale it so that icon is barely visible. And I do that as you always do, to adhere to those recommendations, but it felt like it was too dark. There was times where I couldn't see too well, so I had to go back and dial it up because there was some traversal areas that there was a little ledge I had to climb up or something, and I physically couldn't see. I didn't get right up to the TV like you did. Maybe that would have helped me a little bit, but my eyes were struggling to adjust. But I liked the fact that there was next to no HUD. Like there was no map, there was no map marker, there was no compass. All you had was your sort of little indicators for your health and your stamina, and then also it'd show the ammo available on the various projectile weapons you had, and that was it. So I really liked that it was really stripped back, I guess, as is the way of the samurai. It's a very minimalistic lifestyle. So it was nice and clean, and it just let the game do the talking. And I liked as well in that gameplay is how it's not like a full 16:9 aspect ratio. It's scaled back to, I guess, something like you'd see in cinema, so you don't get the full coverage of the screen. So it did feel very art housey. It did feel like it was a Kurosawa samurai film that you were living out, and it was super fun, man. And I guess the openness of this world to a degree where you can see something in the distance or a door opening there or a ladder and just go off into yonder, and you're often rewarded for it. So I like that it respected your time, and if you did get off the beaten track, you were often paid handsomely, which was good. Bit of HP boost or stamina boost mainly, or random collectibles that I never really went and had a look at, but there was some fun ones in there.
Yeah, it got to a point where I was like, collectible, some Japanese trinket or like everyday object that if I was a historian of Japan, I probably care a lot more about, but I don't really.
No, but I think what we probably do both collectively care about is the combat in the game itself, as far as embodying the samurai, like as you are playing as Hiroki in this quest for vengeance and righting the wrongs of his, you didn't really say past because it happened very recently, just righting the wrongs of what happened this morning. But the combat itself, it was challenging but very rewarding. Like you can't just spam X or Y or square or triangle or whatever it's going to be on PC, left mouse or right mouse, I don't know, I don't care. But you can't just slash your way to victory. Like you do need to counter and block and parry and watch your enemy's movements. Otherwise, you're going to get cut down, which I learnt several times during my playthrough. What about you? Did you find that sort of medium or normal difficulty a challenge like I did at times?
Yeah, it definitely started off fairly simple and escalated as things went on, especially as you were introduced to different types of enemies, like ones that block a lot more, or there's the guys that have the spears who proved challenging at different points, and then things get a bit more crazier later in the game again. But it was great. I felt like picking up the more complex combos that they teach you along the way as things did get more complex, and just that step by step, layer by layer, adding to your abilities so that you always felt like you weren't just necessarily using the same moves or combination of moves. I really liked that, and it kind of reminded me of the skateboarding game Ollie Ollie. It's a very simple, like, again, 2D indie version of a genre that we previously have known as a three-dimensional game, like a Tony Hawk or something, but they just reduce it to up square or down X or whatever it is. And I liked that kind of almost like Street Fighter-y
simplicity.
The simplicity of just like, you got your heavy attack, you got your light attack. Obviously the heavy attack is going to take longer, so it's kind of a scenario where that makes sense and a scenario where it doesn't make sense. So figuring that out was really fun, and just trying to apply the right moves to the right sequence of enemies, because they're coming at you from the two different directions often, and occasionally you'd have someone's on a horse, so they're a bit higher, or someone's got a bow, so they're further away. You need to like close the gap, and having that roll in the mix as well was I just felt like there was enough variety to that to keep things interesting, as well as variety in the enemies, as well as the variety in the moves that you have to dispose them.
Most definitely. Like once sort of it felt like you got familiar and comfortable against a certain enemy archetype, the game would just change things up and bring in a new wrinkle to it, or an enemy that had some type of ranged attack, or that was riding a horse. On the horse front, I only attempted to slash at them a few times, and I was just sort of blocking their attack as they came through. But did you ever attack them and like, can you get them off the horse? Can you kill the horse riders?
Yeah, that was where I pulled out the old bow and arrow and just took them out.
Oh, good call. Yeah. Good call. Yeah, because I was just sort of blocking their charge attack as they sort of trotted past, and I'd have a few slashes, but could never do anything serious to them. So I just kept going because they're one of the few enemies that you don't have to kill to keep moving forward. All the other ones I found that sort of have like almost like a spectral gate that'd close you off where you can't progress any further without killing the enemy you've just cross paths with. So they're the only ones.
Yeah, that spectral gate, as you called it, I had the feeling that it was almost like a VHS style glitch as you approach the side of the screen. So that felt even more like it was an old samurai movie.
Yeah, a bit of a throwback there. Yeah. Maybe the tape was getting eaten at the time on the Betamax or what have you. But yeah, the combat was great. On the ranged weapons, I didn't use them all that often. I found like when you get the old traditional sort of single shot blunderbuss, I can't remember the actual traditional name for it. Apologies on that. But when you get that, you can do some mad damage. But I found the kunai or the shibruken equivalent that you're throwing out, I didn't find they did a ton of damage, so I didn't use them much. The bow and arrow was kind of cool, but yeah, it was mostly just myself and my blade doing the damage in 90% of the fights.
Right. Yeah, well, you must have got really good at doing that, because I certainly relied on the projectiles to get me out of some binds, especially later in the game. Like there were some boss fights where it if you had a bit of distance between them, you could certainly chip away at bigger chunks of health using either the gun or the bow and arrow, and even the daggers to just chip away as well, just a little bit here and there. But occasionally I just wanted to pull like the Raiders of the Lost Ark, where you got the swordsman showing off and Indy just pulls out the revolver and takes care of him. Sometimes I was like, I can't be bothered with this, and just shoot a guy with a bow. Especially those guys with the spears, they have heaps of range and they're kind of harder to approach. So I was just like, I'm just going to shoot you with 2 arrows and be done with you.
Yeah, that's a smart play. It's a smart play. Yeah, but the combat, like you do get a lot of abilities and a lot of combos unlocked as you explore these 6 chapters. I didn't find myself using all of them. I had sort of a small yet vast rotation of combos and slashes that I found I was using predominantly, that I don't want to say it helped me cheese the game, but it was comfortable, and the muscle memory on the button presses worked for me to be able to sort of parry and do a combo and roll around here and whatever else. But because there was a few of them, there were like 5-6 different button presses with certain angles and directions attached at the same time. And I'm like, my heart is racing too much to try and sort of intricately step my way through that as I'm trying to avoid getting a pike in the face.
Yeah, there was like the long lunge that could be followed up with a couple of slashes that was pretty effective. It just, as long as they didn't block it, you could just take care of a guy pretty quickly. I also found there was like, if you have your back to someone and you do that back attack where you turn around and slash them, it never gets blocked almost at all. So you could kind of deliberately turn your back on someone and then just take them out with that.
Yeah, and you felt like a badass sometimes when you could sort of perfectly counter and parry into a slash and like one-shot somebody, especially when, you're facing the other way. You do feel very much like a samurai at that time, and you sort of like fist bump yourself for feeling like you're just this gaming boss right now, because it's super slick and it looks so stylized on that black and white background, especially when you're in doing certain areas where there might be the sort of like the paper walls that you see in a lot of Japanese architecture, and you're having fights behind that, and the shadow play is showing these jewels play out, and it looks so good.
Yeah, for sure.
I guess sort of expanding on the look so good, maybe we can sort of bundle all this in together and talk about graphics performance and even the music and sound, just for a visual and a audio-based experience. Yeah, I thought, like, and we've touched on it a few times, this game's very stylized. It's very, very aesthetically pleasing. I'm a big fan of just that really muted color palette. Felt like, yeah, the Japanese samurai films of yesteryear, and then accompanying that with a really traditional Japanese score. I think it went hand in hand together to give you this very true to these origin stories of feudal Japan and the way of the samurai. It felt like I was, living my best Kurosawa samurai film life. And I was just lapping it up. It was oozing everywhere. I was just slurping it up however I could. It was a good time.
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of games give you these options to throw on a black and white filter. Ghost of Tsushima did it, obviously, and some other more cinematic style games will do the same thing. But I never use them. Like I'm always like, yeah, it looks pretty cool, but it doesn't look as good as color, And ultimately, it's the same. Like you can watch Logan in black and white, the movie, the X-Men movie, or you can watch it in color. And I always like the idea of it, but I think given the option, I just pick the color because there's more to it. There's, I guess like there's something to be said for the aesthetic of black and white, but I don't select that option when I have the choice. But what they've done here is they haven't given you the choice, and that's a really bold decision that I respect, because they've said, no, this is what it's meant to look like. And I think it would have been a lot easier to not have to do the amount of detail you get from the shading and color for a smaller team. But, I guess they are one of the larger ends of the spectrum for indies. They're like almost 300 employees. And that really shows because there is so much polish to the art, to the environments. It all feels like, I keep saying the word authentic, because it just like instead of like roaming through the countryside like you are in a lot of the open world games, most of the combat is happening in villages and inside buildings and everything. So there's a lot of detail, and it just feels like you're there, really. So I give them kudos for that, and for the performance. Like for an indie, again, it runs so well. Like I didn't get any freezes, or like I didn't feel like I was being punished for the way that I fought, as far as that hit didn't land, and there was no cheap, bugs like that frustrated you as a player. So I really have to give it to them for putting together such a well-running game. Like I can see you kind of just had like one or two issues with bugs.
Yeah, I didn't have many issues. Mine was mainly down to the audio itself. So there was a couple of situations, especially where you do get a couple of cutscenes where there is some discussion and dialogue between the main characters. And there is only a cast of sort of 5 primary characters that have sort of notable actors attached to it as far as doing the voice acting as well. And there was a few exchanges I had where you're still getting the subtitle track along the bottom, because obviously this game, it's completely voiced in Japanese. You don't get any English dialogue. And I don't know if you get an option to play it with English dubs. So I think it's wholly and solely Japanese experience, which is like what you said, as far as they don't give you the choice on the color palette. I like that they've just said, no, this is the way you play this game. Love it or leave it, which is, love the boldness. But
before you go on, like we just did Ghostwire Tokyo that you played in Japanese and I switched to English. And I probably would have switched this to English if I had the choice, but I do like they didn't give me the choice, because it's like, too bad. Like this is the way the game's meant to be played. I really feel like they committed completely to the approach of that Kurosawa style, or whatever was the main influence on, I guess, the story and the setting of this game. They've gone whole hog, so to speak.
Yeah, I like that. Like
Wild Hog.
Like you see, that's not a bad connection there. But I like that they haven't sort of tried to cater to everyone in that regard. Like, I know that will upset some people, and we'll be met with some criticism out there as far as it's not as accessible as some might like, with the color palette and with the voiceover option being only in Japanese. But yeah, it is very, very tried and true to that sort of era and that vibe and that aesthetic they're going for. And it was really good. So it was a bit annoying where it only happened 2 or 3 times in these cutscenes where you'd still see one of the characters interacting with Hiroki, and you'd see Hiroki or the other characters interacting with mouth move, and you'd see the subtitle track underneath, but no vocal delivery. So it was a bit jarring at times because I was fully immersed. Like, you got to be fully paying attention to understand the story and read those subs. But yeah, that happened to me a couple of times. But outside of that, the game ran smooth, no crashes, no weird glitching or tearing. And just quickly circling back on one thing on the graphics, I liked that the environments carried more detail than the characters, you could say, for the most part. You do see a little bit more detail in those brief cutscenes, but overall, the detail on the assets that the developers were sort of putting together was focused primarily on the world around Hiroki and co. And it really, really paid dividends, I think, because the environments were stunning. Even when they were on fire and nightmare laden and things like that, it still looked gorgeous.
Yeah, and further to just like how things looked, the camera angles that they would pick as well, because you might think like, okay, it's a left to right kind of 2D plane for these fighting scenes, but then you walk through that right side of the screen and you could come up from the center, from the top, from the right, from the left, as you are traversing these villages. And sometimes I'm like, wait, where am I? Oh, I'm in that corner, and I've been holding a certain direction, and I have to figure out where I am and press on. And I just felt like some of those camera angles were really cinematic, and they really pushed in on that vibe of making it feel like something with a film kind of quality. So it made the environments really interesting to look at. They were like landscape paintings in a way, the way that they were composed.
Most definitely. And that word cinematic, I think, perfectly summarizes this game from a visual standpoint. And I loved, you'd get nice tight shots as you're going into certain areas. And it would throw you for a split second when you do go through a door, up a ladder, and pop up into this next scene. And then you're like, where's Hiroki? Oh, there he is. He's over there. Okay, my bearings are adjusted again. But it was really slickly done. Like, even though it was hard cuts between some of these cameras, it wasn't very like jarring in that regard. Like, it felt pretty smooth and seamless, and it did feel like we were watching a movie. Like, even though we've sort of mentioned that several times now in this first 28 minutes or so, it does feel very cinematic, but it's done in such a way that adds to the experience. And it's just such a nice visual feast, JP. But maybe we have a look at, have you got any other nitpicks and gripes that you want to sort of talk about before maybe we start shifting into our spoiler-free recommendation, then jump into spoilers?
Yeah, a few. I think we kind of skipped over just talking the very first category we had, which is the story. We kind of skipped past that. So should we go back and just quickly give our general perspective on that? Like,
sure.
Yeah. So the story of this game, like from a narrative perspective, it was very simple. And I think that suits the gameplay because there's, enough world building in there to feel authentic. That there's so much done through the environments, through the collectibles, if you want to go in there and read about them, but even just through seeing them, I think adds a lot to feel like you're actually in that sense of place. I did find it interesting that they added branching storylines as the game came towards the latter end. There was a few, at least 2 different points where you had a few choices to make, and I'm really curious what like the difference that they made.
I think we'll know. Like, we got some different endings, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm sure we did. We'll get to that in the spoiler section. But I really wish that there was a way to go back to that point in the game as like a save point and then try out the different endings or
you cannot
branches.
I tried. You cannot.
Yeah. So, even though it's a short game, you're still going to have to slog through like the, 4 hours that lead up to that point or whatever it is, which I think they're tied to trophies as well. I think there are trophies for each of the different endings. So it's not going to be a quick game to 100% if you're into that kind of thing. We also don't know because they, as of recording this, have still somehow not revealed the full achievement and trophy list, which is completely new to me. Like, I've never seen a game this close to release where the trophies haven't at least pinged on, one of the websites that tracks that kind of thing.
Have you, were you having trophies pop though when you were working through the? Okay. Because I was the same. So I was having achievements pop.
Yeah. And usually, like, when it pops, you can, press the PlayStation button and go and look at the rest of the trophies. And that doesn't often happen with games that haven't released yet. But it's nowhere to be seen with this game. Like, you couldn't even see them apart from the one that you had just popped. So really, really frustrating if you want to. I guess this is going to be specific to people reviewing the game, but if you want to know what the trophies are so you can go for a few of them, it's like, I'm just guessing here, but it did look like there was different trophies for each of those choices that you could make, which I guess would be at least six choices. So just be careful or be wary of that if you're a trophy hunter. But yeah, that was my spoiler-free take on the story. Just, it's nothing like amazing, but it certainly suits the genre as far as, the tale of revenge or honor or vengeance and these themes that are quite common to the samurai world.
It is very interesting that listing isn't available, and also that reviews, we're recording this on the 1st of May at the moment. The game officially launches on the 5th. So the game is available out in the wild in 4 days' time. And reviews aren't up at the moment. It's a surprisingly late embargo.
Yeah, not until launch day. So people can't even hear this until then. And it is surprising for a game that's seemingly straightforward positive. Like it's usually when there's a little bit of controversy or it doesn't run that well on one of the platforms, or, it's some weird policy of like a Bethesda or whatever that they don't allow reviews until launch day. But yeah, not quite sure where they're coming from with that, because I think that it would have helped build some of the hype to, leading up to launch, have these reviews coming out. Because for me, it's probably, I would be surprised to see it rated lower than like a 7.5 or an 8.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's what my gut tells me as well. I think it's going to review really well because it was a nice, polished, tight experience, and there is some replayability there, like as you said, if you wanted to hunt those other trophies or get a different ending, and that stuff we'll talk about in the spoiler section soon.
And there's a new game plus, I think,
where it's one shot and you're dead.
Right. Okay. Is that what? Yeah, I saw that there was like a one shot mode, and I was like, is that when you're overpowered and can kill people in one shot?
No. So there's once you finish the game once, it'll unlock a mode where if you get hit once, you're dead. And I don't know if that means you're dead and you've got to start the whole game again, or you're dead and you're back to the closest save point in the game, which is nuts.
That is nuts. But, I do like that loop of kind of like getting to the next checkpoint because, occasionally you'll get stuck at one enemy that takes off like half your health. So you're like, okay, I've only got to get to the next screen maybe, or to the end of this area with the health I've got left. There's no med kits. You can't heal yourself until you get to that point. So yeah, just going quickly back to the gameplay. I did like that kind of checkpoint / completely heal yourself at those different points.
Yeah, it was nice. And it just not having to worry about any inventory management just meant you can focus on being a badass samurai. And it was good. And yeah, there was a few times you'd get to that checkpoint and you'd have one little slither of health left, and you just hope that an archer or a gunman or whatever just doesn't get you out of shot as you're rolling towards the little checkpoint shrine. And then you get there and you can sort of rest and reset and then keep progressing forward to avenge your clan, because the evil Kaguru, or that's how I'd pronounce it, right? Kaguru?
I can't remember, but sure, let's go.
Kagerou. Kaguru is how I'd pronounce it. Yeah, he's the big bad of this game. So JP, what other nitpicks and gripes have you got that you wanted to throw our way? Spoiler free, of course, before we jump into those spoilers.
Sure. I don't have a lot because I think that, like I said, a decent sized team over at Flying Wild Hog, they did a great job putting this together without like technical issues. And, I guess if anything, I could say that occasionally you'd have like some enemies that were approaching from outside of that 2D plane, and it wasn't always clear when they were able to be attacked because they'd be, you're looking at a 2D perspective and you can't actually tell that they're behind that straight line. So they're kind of waiting their turn for you to kill another enemy before they step onto that plane and can be attacked. So that was something that I noticed a few times that I would probably think could have possibly been handled better, whether they were standing further to the side so you didn't get confused. Some of the branching paths, like I talked about the exploration before. Occasionally I'd go down a path thinking it was the exploration direction, but it was actually progressing me into combat, and then there was no way to go back. Or there might have even been combat in both directions. So I think like, oh, well, I guess I'll just keep going this way. And then I realized that I missed an explorable area before, and I can't be bothered going back at that point. So there's a few times where I just feel like it would have been nice to know that I was going down the wrong path, if that's the way you want to look at it. Again, not a huge thing, just as we're talking nitpicks. But yeah, that's basically all I want to mention. There was like a checkpoint as well that I think leading up to a boss.
It was a bit further away. Yeah, and you had to clear through a heap of enemies. I know the one.
Yeah, you had to and it was like, okay, I died, go collect the shiny power up in the other direction, and then go run that way. Because I used the checkpoint and saved before I got the power up, I had to collect the power up every single time. And it was just like, yeah, it could have just been, it's a small kind of game design element that could have been done better. But again, it is a gripe.
Yeah, I'm with you. I agree on those ones. We praised, I guess, the lack of hand holding and mini map and compass and things like that earlier on. But yeah, when there is a few parts in the game where you end up at a fork, and if you go one direction, there's a chance you might slide down a ravine and you can't get back up to check the other area. So it's hard to tell which way is the right or the wrong way to go to find some of those collectibles and upgrades. And yeah, I know I probably left a good half a dozen, I'd say, over my playthrough in there where I'm like, actually, instead of zigging, I'm going to zag here. And then it's like, oh, now I'm stuck in a boss battle, or now I've slid down here and there's no way to get me back up there. Minor grievance, but I guess it rewards the replayability factor there. But the other thing that I wished we got more of was maybe a bit more of an emphasis on those projectile or ranged weapons. Like there was no puzzles or situations where you had to use them. And I like that freedom of choice in one hand, but on the other, maybe there is a few puzzles where you might have to shoot the bow over there to hit a certain tile or switch to open up the map a little bit, because they sort of felt like forgotten items for me a lot of the time. Like you mentioned, you're using them pretty regularly, but it was very few and far between for me with the weaponry. So it would have been nice to sort of say, oh, Hiroka, remember you've got that tasty bow on your back? Shoot that thing in the distance to open up that area, but there was none of that. So I think that was a bit of a missed opportunity as well.
The puzzles were fairly basic as well. Like they could have added that kind of element to it to just mix things up a bit. Like usually the puzzle consists of there's 3 Japanese characters and you have to look at them and remember them and put them into a spindle to open a door. It's a very simple mechanic. So yeah, having something where you have to shoot an environmental thing to reveal those characters or something might have been interesting. Yeah.
That's it. Just to sort of lessen that sort of Japanese character monotony, because it didn't even matter. I don't think I always lined them up naturally in the top, like it was sort of broken into 4 quadrants to unlock this puzzle. Did you do them in any other areas as well, or did you always try and marry those 3 characters up in a certain spot on that little spin wheel?
I don't really know what you mean. I just kind of look at them and go, okay, that one looks kind of like a man jumping in the air. That one looks like an A. and then I just try and remember and find them on the spindle, and then spin the third one until it clicked. So,
so you never really like. Okay, so because I'd always, because it was in like 4 slices of pie, 4 wedges in this spindle, but I'd naturally, and then there was 3 lines inside, obviously, with characters in those 3 areas, and you sort of spin the 3 layers. I'd always line them up so they're in that top wedge every time. So I'm curious if it was dependent on if it had to be there, or if you could line those same 3 characters up anywhere.
I think they had to be the top. Yeah.
Okay. There you go. There you go. But yeah, that's sort of the nitpicks and gripes as far as spoiler free. As far as that spoiler free recommendation, I'd say yes, I do recommend this game. It's $29.95 AUD, give or take, depending on where you're buying this from. You can get some extra discount if you're a PlayStation Plus member. I haven't checked the Xbox store to see if it's the same if you're a Game Pass member and things like that, but I assume that would be the case. So you can save yourself 10+% depending on your platform there. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed my time with this. 6 to 7 hours, really, really easy to get through, nice and digestible, tight, unforgiving at times combat, but very rewarding at other times. And it's one of my favorite games I've played so far this year. It's been very enjoyable.
Yeah, I'd agree with that too. And I think if any of the stuff we've said about, how authentically Japanese and samurai this is, if that appeals to you, then it's definitely worth checking out. I mentioned before about how Oli Oli is a great simplification of like a skateboarding experience. And there are these like indie versions of AAA games like Salt and Sanctuary is to Dark Souls. I feel like this is that to Ghost of Tsushima. So if you were a big fan of Ghost of Tsushima and enjoyed that story about Jin and Japan and honor and revenge and all that kind of thing, like you're getting the same thing boiled down into a very concise 6 or 7 hour experience that for me it was playing 90 minutes for 5 days, and it was like something to look forward to come back to every night. It never wore off its welcome. You could just smash through it in 2 nights if you wanted to. You were probably closer to doing it in a few days. And it might drag or feel a bit more repetitive if you just smash through it. But I think if you just like want to have a week where you just play this game every night for a little bit, and it's a nice little meal.
Like cleanser?
Like a nice little before you go to bed, like
a little late night snack, you reckon?
Yeah, a little late night snack before bed. Like I definitely hope that people out there in 8-Bit Nation will check this out, because I could see it going under the radar just because it's a little bit less accessible with the black and white, the Japanese. But again, I think we have a lot of listeners with good taste that will dig that kind of thing too.
I think so. Yeah, I think we can both confidently say, spoiler free, that this game is 8-bit approved. But listeners, for now, if you haven't played the game yet and you're listening through and you don't want any of the narrative spoilt, maybe pause the podcast, go work through this game over a couple of nights as a little late night snack, as Jono alluded to just now, and come back once you've rolled credits, and we can dive deep on spoilers together in podcast form. But JP, let's jump spoilers. Let's talk about our favorite moments in the game, and lead us off.
I thought all the boss fights were really fun and rewarding, because you've been through that loop of I guess repetitive waves of enemies, and then you get thrown someone that's got a different type of attack, and then you get thrown an enemy that has a longer chunk of health, and it's like, okay, how am I going to do this? And then as you went through the game, introducing new enemies, you've got like these kind of almost zombie-ish soldiers to fight. Then the first time you go to Yomi, into this kind of underworld afterlife type area with ghost-like enemies to fight, and a monster of a boss fight. Like there was just enough in those boss fights that kept things fresh and interesting for me. And no, I don't think, at least for me, any of them were ones that I could figure out on my very first attempt It was kind of like die a few times, get the idea, get the execution, figure out the best techniques. Like I said before, the way that you have all these different moves to utilize against different types of enemies. And it always felt rewarding to take them out because of that. So, yeah, I think my favorite moments were going up against those bosses and just meeting those new enemies, whether it was the zombie or the ghost enemies for the first time.
Yeah, it was very refreshing where you went from, I guess, normalized feudal Japan, running around sort of the fields and you know, that Japanese traditional architecture in the temples, to getting in a fight. So obviously, I guess the really quick play-by-play as far as where the story gets us up to for now. Yeah, you're playing Hiroki. Your sensei, Sanjuro, gets killed when you are a young apprentice still, probably teenager, in this sort of time period, by a guy named Kaguru, who you end up killing or felling, and you think he is gone and away and life is good, and you grow up then with Eiko, who is Sanjuro, who is your, as I said, your sensei. Eiko is Sanjuro's daughter. You end up sort of establishing a relationship with her, and you're ruling this township in Sanjuro's stead. But lo and behold, Kagero is not dead, and he comes back years later, runs vengeance, has a bit of a pretty smart war tactician's brain here, and he sort of sends a heap of people in one direction, and you as Hiroki gets his group of samurai and run out there to try and take him down, but it was a misdirect. And while you're doing that, Kaguru and the rest of his army comes in, slays Eiko, slays most of your people, and then you end up circling back to Kaguru. You get killed, end up in Yomi, which was, yeah, as JP mentioned, the Japanese afterlife, and you've got to fight your way through there to try and get a second chance to take down Kaguru and avenge your people and avenge Eiko, and I guess avenge the samurai code. Is the story and the premise.
It is indeed. Yes.
I think I got all that. I didn't write any of that down. I was just going off the grey matter, and I think that's how it all flowed pretty succinctly.
I'm impressed because, you know, it's with a language barrier, I think maybe some of it doesn't sink in as well as, you know, just straight up hearing something in English and reading the subtitles in English. So you've done very well. But what were your favorite moments, I guess?
Yeah, like what you touched on, that first time when Hiroki is awakened in Yomi in the afterlife, and you do see this like nightmare hellscape with beasties and creatures and warped dead or undead people, especially a lot of them are your victims, people you've slain, have come back or are just stuck in this sort of limbo-esque afterlife, and you've got to slay them again. It's I really like that aspect of it, where you're revisiting and retreading the past and some of those fights and interactions you've had. The boss fights that you mentioned, JP, they were great, and I like that they were varied, and the character models for all of those boss fights were very hellish, and I don't know if they were sort of modeled off certain Japanese folklore and things, but some of them did sort of look a little bit that way and remind me of stuff like Ghostwire Tokyo that we played not too long ago on a spoiler cast. So that was fun. But I think my favorite moments where I was smiling and feeling just like a gangster in this game was when you do stun or daze an enemy and you can press RB or R1 on the controller. Who cares on PC? I'm sure it's, I don't know, Alt F4 or something. Don't actually press that because that means you're going to close. But, when you do have the ability to finish a character, and Hiroki does these mad animations, like it's not the same one every single time. Some of you like cut a head off or stab through the chest or spin around and stab him in the back. And it's just really stylized and artistic. And every time that happened, I was like, oh yeah, I'm pretty cool right now.
And it gives you some health back too.
Yeah. That's how you replenish your health outside of the save point, is by finishing people off in a stylized, badass samurai way. So that combined with those boss fights and, just traversing Yomi as a whole, even though I did feel it overstayed its welcome a few times, like it dragged in a few bits there where I'm like, come on, just get me to the boss fight. What do you mean I got to run through this next part? But anyway, my gripe. But yeah, really cool, really cool.
I like that too. It's just that I was too frantically slashing at them to notice that they were dazed. So often I would notice, like, after I've like just done a basic normal attack to finish them off, that I could have done a finisher. Damn it.
You can feel even more powerful on that next run through as you try and unlock those additional endings and potential variations in the storyline. But maybe we can sort of flip the script and go from the favorites and the positives to some of those least favorites and negatives. I know I have sort of said that those 6 chapters, that 5 to 7 hours of runtime, it felt good. It felt like a good amount of time. But I feel either they could have potentially cut out a little bit of fat where a few of those chapters ran a little longer, and maybe given some more backstory on Hiroko and even Aiko, and like from them going from teenagers to then adults, it just like, happened. Like there was no text, there was no cutscene, there was no nothing. It was just your sensei was dead. And then you just cut to present day where they're adults. Like I wouldn't have minded just a little bit in there, maybe showing them because they were grieving and obviously clearly at a loss. Maybe give me something in there as far as what's happening before he just, like, Hiroko and Aiko ascend to be the lord and lordess of the village.
Yeah, especially since a lot of the emotional weight is meant to come from their relationship as a couple.
Yeah.
It's like, there's a bit of dialogue when they're teenagers that you get the sense that he's, into her or whatever, or that she means a lot to him, or, but yeah, there was no, I guess it's hard with, like, what are you really going to throw in there? Like a scene where you're picking flowers on the river, but
something
Days Gone style. But yeah, I know what you mean. Like, even if it was just like a montage of them growing up together and falling in love and that kind of thing, could have just been a cutscene.
Yes, something in there, because it felt a bit jarring for me to go from Kagero getting killed to then suddenly, surprise, 5 minutes later, Kagero's back from the dead and he's now raised this whole army and he's coming to get you after all these. Oh, he's not coming to get you because he forgets you exist. You're nothing, because he makes a deal in the afterlife and takes the power in Yomi and fights his way out and goes on a tour of vengeance. But yeah, it felt very jarring in that moment where there needed to be a little bit more time in between for it to breathe and pad out some story. I would have liked that. So that's my biggest nitpick or gripe in that regard is, give me a little bit more filler in there. Just pad out this romance, or montage. Let's Hiroki be running up the stairs training Rocky style and like swinging a sword at bamboo over and over to try and get to the level of Lord.
Yeah, he was pretty powerful for a teenager. Like, you're playing that first chapter, he's just like wiping out these attackers.
Yeah,
like they're nothing. But I guess that's why it's fun. He's a special kid. So something that will lead me into what I didn't like, but something that I really did like that I didn't mention already, was there's a sequence where you're trying to save this village, but everyone there thinks that you're the enemy and they don't believe you. So they attack you and you kind of, in self-defense, have to kill them. And I really loved that conflict that Hiroki had to face of like, I don't want to fight you. Like for that whole chapter, it was like, I don't want to fight you. And they just didn't believe you. So I really liked that tension that created. And unfortunately, besides that section, I don't feel like any of the dialogue or interactions were super memorable.
Totally
the game.
Totally agree.
Like there was a fun sequence where there was like an enemy pinned under a boulder or falling debris or something. But yeah, generally I feel like the story was like probably leaning towards simplicity and serving the purpose of just driving the gameplay forward. And it did that perfectly well. But in doing that, it just means, for me at least, it wasn't super memorable. It was kind of more about the journey of, literally progressing through these different areas for a different purpose in each chapter and going on that spiritual journey as well into the afterlife and back again, or however it ended up being for the different choices that were made.
Totally agree. It felt like this game was just, they were just trying to get you to the next cool set piece with a little exchange, whether it be against one of the standard bandits or samurai there, that you used to fight with. And it's like, Hiroki constantly like, I'm not here to fight you. I've got no beef with you. And they never believe him. I don't know why. Like if they've been seeing him for years and years, maybe if they did have a cutscene, they'd be familiar with who he was in between there. But it felt like it was, wave of enemies, run, stab, get to an area where you're fighting beside a waterfall or on a fallen tree or behind a paper silhouette. You have a little brief exchange, then you have a sick battle. And then it's through trash mobs, sick battle. And that's fine. It's a fun gameplay loop and I enjoyed it. But if they padded out some more of those little side stories, because you meet a lot of random characters, then there's others you can't interact with. Like there's people from your village trapped in cages that you run past. Like, shouldn't I be able to like open that and free them? And it's like, nope, there's no flashing white dot there. You can't interact. So you move on.
Yeah. And in saying all this, I think that it doesn't really matter because it's a gameplay first experience and the gameplay is really what matters most and is done so well that it's almost like everything else. Like if you stripped every line of dialogue out of this and they just like, you just interpreted everything from body language, I think it wouldn't have been as good, but it would have worked.
Oh yeah. It'd still hit pretty similar.
Yeah, and you could go, okay, this is clearly the bad guy, and he's clearly evil, and this is clearly someone that I'm saving in this sequence. Like you could have, there's a world or a style where they go that way with maybe, I guess because it's a cinematic style, it wouldn't have worked. But if it was a more like pixelated. If you think about this game being like a pixel art version, it would have worked anyway. Kind of losing the point there. But I guess my whole point is is that it doesn't really matter. Like as much as we're nitpicking the story being, less than The Last of Us Part 2, it doesn't need to be that because it's about the satisfaction of that gameplay. Yeah, totally
agree. And yeah, there's a point there. We got there. It was not as clear and concise as Hiroko's journey through the underworld and seeking vengeance. But as we've sort of touched on in the non-spoilers, there is 3 different paths you can choose, and you do get met with choices, I think 3 times in total, where it sort of asks what you're here for, what you're fighting for. And it's, are you fighting for Aiko, your love? Are you fighting for people, or are you fighting for vengeance? That's sort of the three sort of areas it stems from. So it's almost like love, honor, and vengeance, or love, honor, and rage, I guess you could say, because I sort of stuck with the honor on the first 2, where it's like, no, I need to avenge my people. I can't stay with Aiko. I need to get back to the village and right the wrongs. But then on the 3rd try, when you're down in Yomi, and it's pretty much the final question it asks you before you get teleported back to take down Kageru, I didn't pick love or honor. The 3rd option was I don't need any of these gifts, because I thought, like, I misinterpreted at the time, but what the underworld, like this spirit's trying to play me to keep me down here. I don't want to be bestowed these gifts and disgrace my clan or disgrace Aiko. So I said, I don't want the gifts. But that is in fact me saying, I don't care about Aiko. I don't care about my village. I don't care about honor. I'm on rage. I just need vengeance. I need to kill Kagero. So I went that route. So after I killed Kagero at the end, I become Kagero. I become a warlord. And like Hiroki makes this monologue, or I guess a speech to his army as well. And he's like, we're leaving this place behind. Who gives a shit about the samurai life? We're just going out for fame. We're going to kill everybody. Like he comes back like evil and really bad. And it went from like this honorable samurai life I lived right up until the last second. And then I became the villain in the end. And I was like, what? I can't go back. I can't replay the chapter. I'm just the bad guy now.
That's a shame. I was sure that you were going to go the big, soppy dude you are, that you would have gone with love and Aiko, and that's what I did. And I was like, oh, it's going to be boring. We picked the same thing, but guess not.
So what happened in your ending then?
So Aiko is obviously dead, and in Yomi. So once everything is squared off, you just go back to spend forever with her instead.
Oh, in the underworld. Okay.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Or in the nice version of it, I guess. I don't know. I'm not 100% on it.
The version where you're not running across thousands of skulls and getting getting targeted by giant spiders from the ceiling and things like that, which I wish they did more with, instead of them just being a static item that's creepy and can occasionally slash you with its foot as you roll past. Have them chase you or break out and you fight them, or at least a couple of them one time.
They really kept it to humans, except for a boss fight here and there, didn't they?
Yeah. Oh, you do get the spirit entity in Yomi that sort of summons the human underlings for her. She was a bit of a bit evil, but humanoid still.
Still shaped like a human. Yeah.
Yeah. But
legs.
Interesting, because I was going to go the honorable route, so I was curious to know if that other honor ending is going to be where I'm back in the village and I've rebuilt the town and I'm living that good samurai life, and maybe I've got myself a samurai understudy by then. But instead, I'm on the warpath, pretty much trying to take over Japan and just killing everybody, and you're loved up, living a good life.
Yeah, you're Darth Vader.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to all these getting uploaded to YouTube, because I'm not going to play the game 6 times to get the 6 endings. I'll definitely be just checking out those different versions and seeing how they all differ, because that's one of the things with branching choices is I always want to know what else is out there. Mm-hmm. So, Telltale games, I often would actually go back and play them again if I was a big fan and see how things turn out differently. But otherwise, thankfully, we have YouTube.
Thank God for the internet in this regard, because I'm with you. Like, I might go back and play this one more time, or maybe I'll play like the story mode where it's just super easy and you can sort of maybe push through it and just get the narrative, because I'd like to know.
Cheeky, back up your save to the cloud and then
play offline.
Save it on a USB and then keep loading that one up to get those different choices if you want to see the different directions that it can go. But
seems like a lot of work, JP.
Yeah, it is.
All right, listeners, that brings us to the end of this spoiler cast. I think we might drop our last word on Trek to Yomi before we close this studio out for another future spoiler cast coming your way, which is as yet to be determined. But JP, what is your last word on Trek to Yomi?
So last year, Devolver gave us Death's Door. This year, they've published Trek to Yomi, and I think they're on a great run. They cannot do any wrong. Occasionally you'll get a game that's surprisingly not quite as good as the rest of them, but I think that when Devolver puts their badge on an indie release, you know that it's going to be worth a look in, and this is no different to that. I think that it's definitely worth your time. It's worth $30, especially if you want to go back and play it again for either the challenge of that one shot mode or just the thrill of, like what you said, now that I've played it and I've convinced myself that I'm worthy because I finished it without bumping down the difficulty, maybe the next time I would go back and play story mode and just mow down every single enemy with a couple less strikes required on each person and just feel like even more of a badass.
No, I'm right there with you. I think like we've sort of mentioned or done the I'd say fully lazy comparison with Ghost of Tsushima, but if you're looking for an indie minimalistic stripped back version of GOT and you want to save yourself some bickies, $30 Australian, can get it cheaper at launch on those platforms as well. If you are a PlayStation Plus, Xbox Live member, probably Steam's got some mad discounts as well. Do it because it's a great game. Can smash it out over a couple of sittings. It feels good. It looks good. And you are good until you decide not to be, as I did. And come be an evil Japanese tyrant like myself and let me know how that felt for you. Did you feel as bad as I did by picking the wrong answer at the very end and completely derailing my samurai mindset? But
you must have just been like beside yourself at that point, because it's the end of the game. You can't like shut down the, did you try and like exit out and
I did. I tried, like I hit it, and then the next line of dialogue from Hariko, and he was getting really angry and carrying on. I'm like, oh no, what have I done? What have I done? What have I done? And I hard exited the game. But I guess the second you click that choice, it saves it into the file, because I reloaded the game, and so then it didn't even give me that dialogue again. It just, the next scene was Hiroki waking up back in his village. So I'm like, I don't even know how that exchange ended.
Yeah. Oh, you'll definitely have to watch it on YouTube then.
Yeah. But Trek to Yomi, officially 8-bit approved, available across every platform. Well worth your time. Very, very enjoyable, and one of the most gorgeous and aesthetically pleasing games you'll come across, I'd say, all year.
Last thing, do we want to do a little prediction where it will sit on Metacritic when all's said and done? Probably.
I like that idea.
As of the time people are listening to this, they can go and check and see which of us has got it right.
Do you want me to start?
Yeah, you go first. Okay,
I'm going to say 81.
Ooh, I was thinking around there too. Are we playing prices right?
Yeah, if we go over, we bust, you reckon?
Oh gosh. Yeah. I was probably going to say 81 as well. So I guess I'll have to say 82. Okay. I could see a few giving this an 85. I can see a few people giving it 86. Maybe it gets the odd 9 out of 10 just for completely executing what it sets out to do. And by the same stretch, I could see it getting a few 7s. I'd be surprised if anyone had enough bones to pick with it to give it less than a 7. But maybe some people hate Japanese people.
Yeah, you evil bastards. And anyone out there that's going to play this game on the second run through with that one-shot death mode, you guys and gals be crazy, because that would be so frustrating and tough and stressful, especially some of those boss battles where there's massive AoE going on everywhere. And oh my God.
It's an enemy attack where he just flicks you off the screen. A big beast. It's like, oh, I was kicking your butt, and then I just didn't dodge one move, and suddenly he's like, no, I've had enough of you.
He got me twice with that. And the second time, the first time it took you by surprise. And the second time I'm like, I blocked it, you son of a bitch. But you got to, I guess, just roll out of the way, because, it flicks you like a bug. But, Trek to Yomi, officially 8-bit approved. 8-bit Nation, if you can do us a nice little solid and rate, review, subscribe this podcast on your podcast platform of choice. If you're talking Spotify as well, give us that cheeky 5 stars on there. You can leave ratings on Spotify, and that would mean the awful lot to us. If you want to get some merchandise, obviously shop8bit.net. If you want to get some audio equipment upgrades, obviously audio-technica.com.au is the place to go there. If you also want to support us monetarily, go over to ko-fi.com/we are 8bit to support us from the low price of $1. It's going to get you exclusive access to content, perks, giveaways, and a whole lot more. But I have been Brendan. You can find me at Brendan 8bit. Jono has obviously been Jono. You can be found at Jono himself. But until next time, 8-bit Nation, may your life be spoiler free.